And greetings, programs, and welcome to another edition of the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and with me, rejoining me after a week away, is Simon. Say hello, Simon. How are you?
Yay! I'm back. I'm fine. Thank you very much. It was a very busy last weekend. First of all, thank you so much for Rachel for stepping in and being so fantastic on the podcast. Rachel, if you're listening, next time you step in, can you be slightly less great? I feel there was a little bit of stress on me now that I have to match this. I was just saying to Matt, I listened to the podcast and went, wait, she began the podcast by talking about the industry and not saying how tired she was from her children. This is a whole new thing. I might try that. But seriously, Rachel was wonderful, and it was a wonderful podcast, and it was so nice to hear you have someone speak to about inside baseball. It was lovely.
Yeah. And Rachel's pretty great, and also has an amazing radio voice. So
she does. She does indeed. No pressure at all. Although of all the weeks to miss, I missed the British genre underdog movie week, which I have a lot to talk about because I hate that genre. I've grown up with that genre. And I really hate it. So I could have helped. But I was out with my daughter on a 3-day extravaganza to celebrate her 8th birthday that culminated in a meal at Miku. Where you like Miku, don't you? Miku is probably some of the best seafood I've ever had in my life.
So for those of you who are listening who not local to Vancouver or Toronto, Miku is a very, very fancy sushi restaurant.
They're famous
and yes, it is
aburi.
Amazing. And they're famous for their aburi sushi, and we're in danger of becoming a food podcast at this moment because that place is good.
I will say 2 things about this. They gave us a little amuse-bouche of scallops. I'd never had a scallop before, and it was a scallop with like red stuff on top in some oil. And I'd never had a scallop because I'm not really into shellfish. And this, I ate it because I was like, I'm going to eat a Miku scallop because it's probably going to be good. And it was like, if butter were a fish. It was amazing. I ate this thing, was like, wait, I like scallops. so that's good. But when the bill arrived, my wife and my daughter were in the washroom. And my son wanted to look at the bill. And I was like, look, just don't react to the bill. And he opened it, and in the middle of the restaurant, he did a full Scooby-Doo. What? Because it was bloody expensive, but it was worth it. It's once a year. So that was my weekend last weekend. So I was very busy.
Well, I mean, it sounds lovely though. That's a fancy restaurant, and 8 is an important number in a young person's growth trajectory, I think. I don't really understand anymore.
It probably is, isn't it? It probably is. But how are you?
All I know is that your kids are sort of both at the age where they should be, sneaking downstairs to watch R-rated movies behind your back.
No, my son.
I look forward to hearing about that.
All my son sneaks downstairs to do is to play the 3DS that I found hidden under the couch. So he could come down in the middle of the night and play it, and then sit in the toilet. So we're going through a moment of him trying to play things that he's not allowed to play. At times, he's not allowed to play them by hiding things around the house. Oh, I laugh, but it's terrible. Look, I'm talking about my children again. How have you been? What have you been up to in the last week?
Good. I have been very busy, so I have not. I am technically attending the Tribeca Film Festival from home. One of the 2 films we're talking about today is technically a Tribeca release, so that's nice because I haven't really had a chance to watch hardly anything that I wanted to, because real life is a thing that happens, and I don't like talking about work on here, so I'm not going to.
Okay, let's not do that. Let's talk about.
I think we're gonna. I mean, the big thing in like nerddom at this moment is obviously this week would have been the 5th episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi and the 2nd episode of Ms. Marvel, one of which was pretty okay, and another one of which was legitimately great. Have you watched either of those things yet?
I have watched all of Obi-Wan so far, and I have not watched the second Ms. Marvel yet.
Yeah, so Miss Marvel continues to be pretty legitimately great.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Bright and colorful and full of creativity, and it shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone that it is being review bombed on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes by upset people. Actually, upset people who basically look like us, like middle-aged white dudes with beards who can't handle when anything isn't directed specifically at
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a wonderful show, and I encourage all of you to watch it. I think we're going to talk more about Obi-Wan Kenobi next week after it's
Yeah.
over. But
Yeah, get ready
suffice to
for
say,
that.
that show has been a bit of a mixed bag so far.
Yeah, well, that's a very polite way of putting that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's inaccurate though. I mean, it's there's some great things and there's some not great things, and I look forward to talking about those next week.
Indeed. I'm glad you mentioned the colours of Miss Marvel, actually, because that's what really struck out for me for the first episode. And that's all I'm looking at the moment since I finished RRR this week as well. And what's been lovely is that if you remember the RRR podcast, I was at a 2-star place during that podcast. And I was so interested in how that changed when I kind of, there's a thing with food that I really like, that if you've, instead of saying I don't like this food, if you try something new, you say I don't know how to eat this, like I don't know, I'm learning how to eat this, like what's this flavor. And I really like that approach. And so I went back to RRR, and as I said on the podcast, I don't want to judge it by Western cinema standards because there are other things to look for. So I learned how to watch it. Like I took a lot of your advice, and I realized I don't know how to watch this. And by the end of it, I was basically standing, clapping, going, "This is the best thing ever!" Like, what is going on right now? My wife watched the last hour and a half with me, and I've never seen her do this before. But she basically talked to herself and did a director's commentary of oh, he's picked up the bike, oh, there's a tiger. Like I've never heard her so vocal in a thing before. It was like a pantomime, and I guess it is like a pantomime. So I drew this stupid graph that was in my head, and I've had so much love on Twitter for this graph from legitimate RRR fans from the culture who have known for years that this stuff is great. So I want to, if you're listening, RRR fans, I hear you, and I'm really grateful for the love you've poured out and the recommendations, because I already have a watch list. I know we both have a watch list of movies from that culture that I can't wait to get into now, especially with a couple of the same actors, because I'm totally on board. And as a result, everything just looks grey and drab now. I tried to watch Fantastic Beasts 3, and by the halfway through, I was like, where's the colour? Where's the excitement? But more importantly, where are the tigers being used as projectile weapons?
I haven't watched Fantastic Beasts 3, but I assume that there is, as with Fantastic Beasts 2, a dearth of actual Fantastic Beasts.
I don't know what to say about that series anymore. I actually really like the first one. The second one's terrible. The third one's got Mads Mikkelsen being brilliant in it, but it is so joyless, and for
Uh,
something that comes from like a magic place, it's a tough watch. My wife watched the whole thing, and I said, "Did it get any better?" And she said, "No." And she's a
yeah.
massive Harry Potter fan.
Well, I mean, Mads Mikkelsen is literally always a win,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and honestly, so is I really enjoy where Jude Law is at in this
Yeah,
point in his career.
yeah, yeah.
But
Jude Law's great.
those movies feel like a big cynical cash in. And honestly, as much as as much as there's an argument to be made for separating art and artists, I have a really hard time separating J.K. Rowling from anything at this point that
Mm,
she's connected to at this point.
mm.
So, because she's as it turns out, a garbage human being. So, yeah.
So
Well,
what are we talking about this week?
that's I was gonna say that's very much like our first film ish, sort of. Not really.
Mhm.
Um, so we're going to talk about two films like we always do, like we mostly always do. Um, and this week we're going to start with a new Netflix release. It's on Netflix already by the time you're listening to this, called Spiderhead, which stars Chris Hemsworth and Miles Teller and Jurnee Smollett, and is directed by Joseph Kosinski, who recently directed one of the best movies of the year, Top Gun Maverick, and now has directed this, which is fine, I guess. It's fine. I mean, it's
What's the setup here? Tell us what we're watching. What's the overview?
yeah. So I had a really hard time with this movie, if it's not clear. Um, so the basic setup is that Miles Teller and Jurnee Smollett and a few other people are prisoners in a futuristic high-tech prison run by a genius pharmacologist, I guess he is, played by Chris Hemsworth, in full-blown smarmy American accent mode. And the whole deal is they have somewhat, relative freedom to move and nice amenities, but they are subject to drug trials at all times. Like they have a thing in their back that delivers drugs, and they are basically trialing drugs that mess with their emotions. There's one that makes them fall in love, and there's one that makes them afraid, and so on and so forth. Um, that's basically the entire setup. It's beautiful people in a beautiful prison on drug trips, and it has a ton of potential. And I actually started but haven't finished reading the short story that came out in the New Yorker called "Escape from Spiderhead" that it's based on. And my problem here is that it should be great, and it's not. I don't know, Simon.
What
What do you think of this movie? I really wanted it to be good, and it's just sort of fine for me.
I got a question for you. What genre is this movie?
It's yeah, that's a great question.
Because this film has no idea what genre it wants to be. I mean, you my opinion of this movie, I think I liked it even less than you did. It's an absolute tonal mess. Like it goes from slapstick comedy to very deep, like traumatic experiences to massive logic gaps. And
I wouldn't. Logic gaps. I don't know if there's logic gaps. Logic gaps.
Well, the whole premise is that they're in this island that is a prison, but they're allowed to treat it like a holiday camp. So they can walk around as they want, and they can chat to everyone. And the it's never really established from Jeff, because one of the twists later is that we find out who actually owns it, but it's never really established that he doesn't what he already thinks is actually in place before we get the reveal later. Nothing changes with Hemsworth's character after that reveal. That like his position doesn't change, his authority doesn't change. The fact that the truth is out about who he does or does not report to doesn't really change anything. And
No, I mean, yeah.
See what I mean? By that point, we've had like up to like the 3/4 mark, we've had hints of a love romance building, and we've had this weird scene where people are forced to. I mean, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? But instructed to have sex with other people whilst on this drug, because they're testing all these different drugs that do different like things. So one will make you feel lust for a person, one will make you see horrible hallucinations, one will make you scared of a specific object, and they believe they're part of this drug trial. And the scene where they test out the lust drug is completely played for laughs. And I think
There's two of them, and one of them definitely is. Yes. Um, so I guess my feedback here is I don't think there's any real egregious logic gaps within the narrative, but what I would say is that this movie brings, as my father was fond of saying about things, new depths to the term shallow. Like, it does not. It's such a rich premise to, it's not one that's new. Like, there's plenty of, this society is actually a prison type stories, or this prison isn't the prison you think it is type stories. But it's such a rich premise for mining commentary on just the human condition and the way we perceive things and emotions and all that kind of stuff. And it does basically none of it. Does basically none of the actual work to be good.
I
And
don't think
I know we're about to disagree, but I enjoyed smarmy American accent Chris Hemsworth, even though he was a bit all over the place. Because I don't necessarily think that that's his fault. I think that's the tone of the film shifting around him a little bit, and him not. I don't know. It's difficult to describe. He's
So
playing one character, and the movie's playing him as another at certain points, and I'm not sure whose fault that is. I think it's photographed very well. I think it's a very pretty movie. I think Miles Teller is. If you like Miles Teller, you'll be on board. Jurnee Smollett is pretty great actually, because she basically always is. But it just doesn't do anything with any of the things that it has, other than look pretty. It's
mm,
so basic. You know what I mean?
I,
It's just that for me. It's just that it's totally basic.
the visuals didn't really stand out for me in any way. But Jodie Smollett was great. I think she's a fantastic actress. But the I completely disagree about Hemsworth. I think the feeling you'll get of the movie trying to make him do one thing and him doing something else is what I felt is that the nuances of what this script needed him to be uh, was completely above the ability that he was able to bring to this. Like I did not think he had any of the depth that, say, Sam Rockwell would have brought to this part. In that kind of mix of I'm trying to be everyone's friend, but I'm secretly in charge. Because he does have this quite interesting thing about his character where he doesn't want to be called Mr. Something. Like he's got this need to be everyone's buddy, right? And I thought
Hmm.
that was quite interesting. Again, nothing's done with it at all. And you needed an actor who could flip between someone who's actually addicted to their own drugs, as we find out, uh, who thinks that they are in charge, but also has the desperation, as it turns out, of making these drugs work whilst keeping the truth of the facility aside. Like, there's a lot going on there, and as you're completely right. There's a lot of potential for a really interesting character study of the person in charge of all that at the same time. And Hemsworth just wasn't up to it at all. Like, I really like him. I think he's a really interesting in certain parts kind of actor, but you needed someone with a lot more nuance and a lot more subtlety in this, and I didn't see it at all from him. And on the flip side as well, I'm not. You mentioned if you like Miles Teller, then you'll be fine here. I don't think he's an interesting actor on any level. I think he's a personality vacuum, and this movie didn't change my mind. He's got some interesting. He's so minimalist in his reactions, and sometimes that's quite interesting. But there's one part where they're taking a laughing drug, and he just doesn't. It's the worst like fake acting laughing I've seen in a long time. Like he's just not. He's not an interesting performer to me at all, and so I don't think that helped. As the
Yeah,
two people leading this movie, they weren't interesting enough to lead what the story needed them to do.
yeah. I thought his best scenes are often the quiet ones in the films that he's actually good in, and I think that's probably true here too. There's one scene where he's been given a drug that makes him say whatever he's thinking or feeling, and he's watching something terrible, and he's just sort of sitting there quietly narrating a scene that's just awful.
Mm,
And
mm.
I thought that was really effective. But yeah, you're right. He's not. He's just like I say. He's just fine. He's fine. He's pretty to look at. Mullet aside, because he has a bit of a mullet in this movie, which I found
Yeah.
a little bit distracting. I'm not going to lie. Um, and yeah, I do disagree about Hemsworth. I think he was exactly what he was asked to be in the movie. And you were talking about how there's a moment where we should have had like his character should have had a turn. But I think that having him be exactly the same smarmy buddy, but actually clearly a piece of shit the whole time, actually sort of was the intent. And I think the movie overall was just too shallow to make it land. I
Yeah,
think,
it was.
but I think we're splitting hairs here, right? We're both saying it's not great. Like
It's not a good film. It's not a good film, and
but it
it's
should be. This is my problem. This is where I come with my
yeah,
problem. I think Joseph Kosinski is a good director,
yeah, I
especially
do
when it
too.
comes to his visual sense. I think that the way he positions the camera, points it, focuses, like all of that stuff is very he's is very good in this movie, and I think that he's already. I mean, it's basically a mulligan because he did Top Gun. He doesn't need to do. It'd be amazing if he had two great movies in 2 months, but he doesn't need to because he did Top Gun. But I mean, even the films that are of his that are of debatable quality, or that people debate about anyway, like Tron Legacy is one, and Oblivion with Tom Cruise is another. Like, there's no denying that his films are visually quite stunning.
I love Tron Legacy, and it really improves on rewatching as well. But visually, it's beautiful. It is beautifully shot.
Yeah, and he's also, I mean, as a person who has very mixed feelings about Miles Teller, Joseph Kosinski has now done 3 films with Miles Teller, and in 2 of them, I think are 2 of my favorite performances of his. One being
Right,
Top Gun, and the other being Only the Brave.
right. I haven't
And
seen that.
and I mean, again, like, that's what's frustrating is that all of the pieces are there. Like, all of it's there for it to be a good or a great movie. And the most I can say about it is that, like, I don't exactly regret watching it. Like, there are worse ways to spend a Friday night if you're stuck at home.
Wow.
It's just frustrating. And the other thing that I really like, I've always sort of hesitate to be upset about this kind of movie, because where else except for like Netflix and maybe Prime are you really going to get a high concept, mid budget, star driven science fiction movie? It just doesn't happen in big ways anymore. This is the only way we get them, and I kind of have to appreciate them at least a little bit, because those are the kind of movies that I love, right? Like, I'm all about the spectacle. I love Marvel, DC movies. I love all of that kind of stuff. But sometimes I just want something that's mid-tier, high concept, all about the acting, and this, or like a unique visual or something. And this had all of the pieces there to be one of those, and it's just not. It's just not.
Yeah, but that's
It's
the thing. Like I agree with you with the mid range high concept sci-fi where they choose a swing and then swing at it, and those things are carried by idea and script and performance. And the only thing this had was idea. Like the script wasn't there, the performance definitely wasn't there for me, and it was just a really scrappy watch. Like the last shot is Jurnee Smollett both crying, alternating between laughing and then being like down faced and almost crying because she doesn't know without spoiling anything. She's not sure what the most appropriate way to react is, and I think that's the perfect encapsulation of how I feel about the whole movie. Like, is it trying to be happy or is it trying to be sad? And it's not an interesting mix of genres. It's a total like tonal mess for me. It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's like oil and water. Like,
Yeah.
and it, like, that moment also should be a pretty perfect encapsulation of them trying to figure out if their feelings are authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just doesn't do any of that.
No, it doesn't.
It just,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. That would have been really interesting to have that as a little coda at the end, like, as the drugs wear off. And of course, it doesn't play with anything like that.
yeah, no, like I said before, it doesn't. It has so much potential, but it doesn't do any of the work.
Mm.
All of the setup, all of the ideas are there. I think all of the pieces are in place, but nothing. It doesn't then do the work. It does
Yeah,
the most minimal, shallowest version
yeah.
of what it could be.
You said there's worse ways to pass a Friday night. This is also on a streaming service, and I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you have more than one streaming service. Go and watch something else. Don't like this isn't worth your time. There's so many other things that you could watch. Go and watch Space Sweepers, a Korean sci-fi movie called Space Sweepers. You'll have a much better time if you want some sci-fi. Like, it's not worth your time. It's just not worth your time.
Yeah, that's a fair reaction. And I mean, to be fair, you're right. There's a ton of better things on streaming services, and if we don't watch them, this is the other thing. If we don't watch them, they won't make more of them, and I want more movies like this, which is why I feel torn. And sorry, not more movies like this, but more movies with
Yeah,
this
I know what you mean.
intent. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't want bad ones. I just want them, but I do want them to make more.
yeah. Hmm.
So same with, like, every time there's a horror film on Netflix, I watch it. Not because I think it's going to be good, although I hope it's always good, but because I just want them to make more horror films. And if we don't watch stuff in the first week, they just go, "Well, that wasn't worth it," and they don't make any more. It's frustrating.
Hmm.
Modern
No,
media landscape is
it is. It's a
frustrating.
fair point. Yeah, it is very different. So, how many stars are you giving this film?
Uh, 2. I'll give it 2.
Hmm.
A generous 2. You?
A generous one from me.
Oh yeah, wonderful. I think that's fair. I think it's. I mean, that lines up with. I liked it a little more than you did,
Yeah,
um, but I don't think it's good. You know,
it made me want to
I
watch Birds of Prey again because Jurnee Smollett is fantastic. Like it goes to show what a great performer she is when you've got something that isn't good, the script isn't good, and she's not surrounded by great performances, and she's just this little like light. She has these. So she has some very good nuanced like reactions and delivery. I find her really really watchable. So that's where my 1 star comes from.
I did like. He's in it like basically not at all, but I did like Nathan Jones as there's a one character who's like a huge tattooed bruiser. You'd recognize Nathan Jones, A, if you're a WWE fan, or B, if you've watched Mad Max Fury Road, in which he played Rictus.
Ah, of
Um,
course,
but
yes.
he plays this muscle bound guy, and he doesn't show up very much, but when he does, it is generally pretty amusing. Either the way he
Mm.
reacts or people react to him is pretty amusing.
Especially as what you think is about to happen in the scene, it does. He does play into that very nicely.
Yeah, but then also, like at the end, when there's, the inevitable big escape, it cuts back
Ah,
to him a number of times, and then he just doesn't show up for it.
it's awful. That end,
So
honestly,
it's
that end sequence was just awful. That the whole thing with the keys and the fight and him not showing up, even though it builds to him like get chasing them and it doesn't go anywhere. It's just I hated
yeah,
that end sequence. It was so bad.
yeah, and that's not a spoiler. I don't think we've spoiled anything exactly, because,
Really haven't.
but it's yeah, it's not great. So
No, don't bother.
I
It's
mean, it is pretty though, and Chris Hemsworth is very attractive. So you could always, you could always, if you're into that kind of thing, just turn it on and put it on mute. It's fine.
I think what we've learned from this film is if you're going to embed a little thing into your skin that has little vials of liquid that you can remotely put into your body, maybe don't put it on your back, like pointing out where it's easily knocked, and have it as a plot point twice in this movie that it's knocked slightly, and when it's knocked slightly, terrible things happen. Maybe put that thing somewhere else a little safer, where
Yeah,
you're not going to knock it slightly.
but just also, if you fall over or bump into something and knock it slightly, bad things happen. Except for the other 6 times where that happens, but nothing happens.
Of
So,
course.
so
Oh
I mean,
God.
I think anyone who listens to us pretty regularly knows that I'm pretty willing to forgive a lot of stuff, but I found it really hard to forgive a lot of the stuff in this one. Other than that, I think it's a really pretty movie. So do with that information what you will. I think we should transition awkwardly to our
Yes,
next film,
I
which is
agree.
better.
It really is.
um, so yeah, that's Spiderhead. We're going to move on now to another streaming release and festival darling. This one premiered this year at the Sundance Film Festival and played twice at the Tribeca Film Festival, which is technically, if you're listening to this on a Sunday, is technically still happening today. Um, it is called Cha Cha Real Smooth. And Simon, why don't you give us the quick lowdown on the plot summary of Cha Cha Real Smooth?
Yes. So, 22-year-old Andrew, played by Cooper Raiff, is in a bit of a junction in his life. His girlfriend is going to Barcelona on a study trip, and he is almost penniless, living back with his parents because she at the beginning she leaves, and it's quite clear that she is ending that relationship. But he kind of hangs on like a puppy dog. There's lots of puppy dog energy with his character, and he works in the wonderfully named Meat Sticks, which is a fast food like corn dog place or something. And it's very clear that his character is very good with people. He's very good like helping people, and he ends up taking his little brother to a bar mitzvah. And because it's such a boring, now is it bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah? There's my ignorance. I think it's a bat
So the
mitzvah.
uh, so the first one they go to is a bat mitzvah.
Right.
Um,
So it's a boring party, and he uses his energy to get everyone dancing and up and around. And two things happen because of this. The first is that he gets booked by a bunch of Jewish mothers in a very funny scene to be the party starter for all their other parties. And the second thing is that he meets Dakota Johnson, who's there with her daughter Lola. So Dakota Johnson plays Domino, and Vanessa Burkhart plays Lola. And Lola has autism, and she's unwilling to dance, and he uses his powers of persuasion to get her dancing. So catches Domino's attention, and then what really happens over the next hour or so is that their relationship grows more tender and more firm, and he develops a relationship as like a protective relationship with Lola, a romantic interest in Domino, whilst helping his brother, whilst trying to sort his own life out and pining after his girlfriend, who's clearly doing other things in Barcelona. So it's lots of interesting moving pieces, and through the parts of this movie that are like, there's a formula here that you'll recognize, but then it does interesting things, and it all teaches him things. By the end of it, he learns things, and it's really carried by his great energy. Like, I don't know who Cooper Raiff is. I've never seen him in anything, but he's got this real like puppy dog energy, and between him and Dakota Johnson, who I thought was fantastic, it really carries this whole relationship, and it ends in ways you probably don't predict or expect. But it's one of these nice, warm, fuzzy movies that I got lots of book smart energy from this. How about you? What's your take on it?
I quite liked it as well. I think that puppy dog energy is a perfect way to describe Cooper Raif's character's energy. I think in many ways it's unique and interesting. I think in many ways it's also like I've definitely seen the movie of the 22-year-old with no direction who finds direction via an older woman and some familiar connection before. Like, it's not a new premise, but it is a very well executed version of that premise, which I appreciate. I've seen people raving about this movie. I'd been hearing about it since Sundance, and we have one friend, Thomas in particular. Hi, Thomas, if you're listening, who now is continuing to rave about it. He hasn't shut up about it since Sundance, and I love that he loves it, but I just thought it was good, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm almost scared to not rave about it as much, but I there's a lot to like here, but it didn't go past like for me. I really enjoyed watching it, and I at the precise moment where I thought, wow, this is really formulaic. Like, you know exactly how this is going to go from a very early point. There's a little shift in that in the last like half an hour, which I really appreciated. But this kind of thing's very much about performance and sort of the relationship between the actors and their characters. And I think that there was a really great chemistry between that central three, and also Leslie Mann, who has an interesting role as Andrew's mum, with a lot going on herself that's never really explored outside of when it needs to be part of the narrative. But there was really good connection between the actors, and I think that carried a lot of this sort of formulaic story through, as did his script, which it's not a people don't talk like this. This is like one of those movies where you watch it that's meant to like reflect how funny people talk, and people
Mm-hmm.
don't talk like this in real life. It's exactly like Booksmart. Nobody talks like this in real life. It's kind of the ideal of how people always know exactly the right thing to say at the right time, and that's fine, but it's not a naturalistic script, if you like, but it's quite fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned you got sort of book smart vibes from it, and I wouldn't say that I got that. But what I did get is I know that Cooper Raiff, I know he sort of got his start because he connected with one of the Duplass brothers, Mark Duplass, I think. And the Duplass brothers are at the center of the whole like mumblecore movement, which, if you're not familiar, I don't have time to explain. But the short version of it is that they've made a ton of movies um, and been in a bunch of movies that are produced. You know, it's this whole group of people, and it's this very naturalistic style of filming, and everyone speaks really cleverly. Sometimes it's improvised. I think the one you've Simon, that you probably like best from that I know you've seen is Drinking Buddies.
Oh,
That came out of that whole movement and crew.
oh, really?
Um,
Oh, I love that show.
um, and so I sort of got that same energy, and it's not the kind of thing where I don't need them to speak naturally,
Yeah.
really. Like if as long as it works within the logic of the story. Um, but I just really I'm I'm sort of mixed because on the one hand I do really like the young dipshit grows up a little bit type story, but I have seen it a million times before though. Like it's again it's a really well executed version of a story that I've definitely seen before.
Hmm.
But I think the standout for me is probably Dakota Johnson.
Hmm.
I think she's pretty wonderful in this. As you know, Cooper Raif's character Andrew is meant to be 22, and they never really state how old Domino is meant to be, but in real life she's 32. And the daughter is played by a woman who is 18 in real life, and it's never really stated how old she's meant to be, but you can infer that she's like 15,
Hmm.
14, something like that. And the sort of the the reasons why Dakota Johnson's character acts and behaves the ways that she does are all very understandable and very relatable. And if anyone's ever had like, you know, a bad experience with love when they were young, I think they'll find ways to relate to this through her. And anyone who's basically been, you know, a male human being at age 22 will be able to relate to Andrew. You know, we're all pretty stupid at that age, and her character clinging on to her youth and sort of knowing she needs to but resisting growing up, I think is a really interesting dynamic, and she does a really great job communicating that not just with her words but with her whole body language and everything she does in the movie, with every bit of material that she's given. I think she's really great, and I hope she gets some recognition for it through the end of the year. I think she's legitimately great in it.
Yeah, I agree. The energy she gives off is exactly the right foil for his, like her kind of world weary, tired energy against his like young, optimistic puppy dog. It works really, really well. And you're right. Like for me, uh, his Cooper Raiff's character in this is the 22-year-old I always wish I could be. I could have been then. Like, and again, there's no 22-year-old who speaks that perfectly and is able to be that confident. I don't believe it at all. But I always wanted to be like the person who knows exactly what to say and when to say it, because I always had trouble talking to people I didn't know. And so it it was interesting, like between that and the way their relationship is resolved, it was a little close to home than I was expecting. So it was there was some personal notes in this film, but the uh, it's you gotta, I think you don't need them to speak naturalistic. You're right, but it is a very much a precise thing. Is it manipulative in some way? Maybe, I don't know. Like
Eh,
it certainly
Phil,
plays the emotional cards very cleverly. It didn't feel cynical. Like you can be. It was not a cynical film, and it doesn't go over the top in making you feel certain things, but it's a
I
very
mean,
precise script, I think.
I know that like no one likes to talk about it, and the term manipulation is bandied about as a negative, and I suppose that it is, but movies are designed to manipulate your emotions. It's just a matter of whether they do it openly or cynically, or whether they do it, you know, smartly or cheaply. And
Mm-hmm.
this one does it openly and not cheaply. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's very
No, I
sincere.
agree.
It's very uncynical. And yeah, I did really enjoy it. It's a perfectly cromulent film, if you will. um, and I know that Cooper Raiff is probably going to move on to bigger things. This is his second feature that he's written and directed and starred in after a short. So he's done one major short film and then these two features, and I'm sure he'll be move on to other things because this is a huge festival darling. And
Yeah,
I think part of the reason it doesn't feel like we were saying just now, I think part of the reason it doesn't feel cynical is that basically all of the characters, or at least the two main characters, are given lots of space to make mistakes and to grow and learn from those mistakes, and not
yeah,
just like obviously your protagonist in any story needs to have room to grow and mature as a character in person, but I think it gives Dakota Johnson's character a really an honest amount of room to make honest and relatable mistakes and learn from them. And the
yeah,
way her story is resolved feels very, for lack of a better way to say it, feels very grown up to me.
yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. The resolution went to a place, and I think it earned that place, and it was a very uh, natural and believable resolution, even though it wasn't quite the one that you thought was maybe coming.
Yeah.
And it fit with everything that had led up to that point, and I thought it was a really interesting decision because it could have gone horribly wrong. And I think a lot of credit should go to um, as a character who is Dakota Johnson's fiance, played by Raul Castillo, I guess, Raul
Castillo, yeah.
Castillo, and he's this like out of town lawyer who's meant to be kind of stoic, but if he could have, it could have gone too far. There's some implication that their relationship's not very happy at one point, and he's so kind of quiet and staring. It could have gone too far into, well, is he actually hurting her? In fact, that's one of the kind of minor things later on. Is he actually hurting her? And the end depends on the ability of us to believe that he's actually a good guy, that he's actually okay. And Raul Castillo, I think, really finds that fine line between being stoic before being threatening, and I thought that was a really balanced performance. I really like Brad Garrett as well, who I'm sure I've seen him in other things before, who played Andrew's stepdad, who he had a minor role, but I thought he did really really well. I really
Mm.
liked the way he did that.
I don't know if I agree that Raul Castillo's character was ever threatening or like causing harm. I think the implication is more that just is he making her happy? Not if he, not is he making her miserable, but is he making her happy?
Yeah, but
And
he's stoic and kind of non-emotional in the way that Andrew is. And there's one story beat where Domino's not there and Joseph is, and Andrew goes to a place where he's worried that Domino might for whatever reason not be okay, and um, and the character of Joseph has to give us that moment before that time that it's got to be a possible, because we're seeing everything through Andrew's head, and when it
yeah,
comes to the resolution, then it's got to go the other way as well.
I just think it's impossible to say what I need to say what I need to say here, which is a really awkward sentence, without spoiling a whole big chunk of the movie. But
Yeah.
I just disagree with the implication. I think it comes from a different place, but I don't want to say what it is because it will spoil a bunch of stuff.
Okay. But he's good.
And honestly, and the that moment in the story isn't really changed by the different intent too severely. It just, but I can't tell you what it is without spoiling a chunk of the story, so I'm not going to.
There's one thing I didn't like, and I don't know if it's my own ignorance, but Vanessa Bogart's Lola has autism, and she speaks in a different way to everybody else. Like she doesn't contract anything. So if she says "I'm not happy," she says "I am not happy."
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this done in many films where the autistic person speaks in full sentences in a way to contrast more regular authentic speaking, which involves way more contractions, as everyone else did in this film. And this is done in that terrible Good Doctor series as well, which is just awful with the autistic doctor. And I years and years and years ago, I did a project with autistic children, and I didn't hear a single one of them ever talk like that. And I was slightly, uh, it slightly annoyed me that her script was written in this way, with like quote unquote the autistic way of speaking that I've seen done in other films. Now, it could be the case that this is a sign and a consequence of autism that I don't know about. Let's not ever discount my general ignorance on these things, but in my experience of working with a lot of autistic kids, that I've never worked with an autistic kid that speaks like that, and I've seen it done in more than one production, and it kind of irked me a bit.
It is possible, and I don't know for sure. And I'm. It's important to highlight that I am just as ignorant as you are when it comes to this. But Vanessa Burkhardt is herself autistic, as I understand it, so it could come from her as well. But
Mm-hmm.
you're right; it is very much a very stereotypy
Mm-hmm.
way of uh, creating contrast with an autistic character. Same with the headphones. She's always
Mm-hmm.
wearing headphones, so she can sort of like she gets to a place of like sensory overload, which is a thing that I understand happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I have known autistic people in my life, and none of them have carried around headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, but I've seen that in TV a bunch of times. You know, like where TV and movies where like the autistic character has a set of headphones that they put on when they need to isolate in place type thing. I've just never seen it in real life. And to be fair, again, I am completely ignorant. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but you're not wrong. I think that the I guess the best way to say it is it does feel like the script for the autistic character was written by a normally abled person, but without a lot of consultation on what it's from the autistic community would be the way to put it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
maybe a bit too much on the side of assumption.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
and but maybe we're wrong. I mean, it's probable even that we're wrong, but I don't in this moment think that we are.
I'd be
So
very interested to find out, and uh, obviously be educated on that. There is a story beat. I can't really. Again, it's a spoiler, but there's a moment where there's a growing connection between Andrews and Lola now trusts Andrew in a way that she hasn't trusted other sitters before, because he becomes her like sitter when Domino wants to go out, and there's a an action performed to help her sleep, and I was. It seems like the film is going down the path of Lola falling in love with Andrew, and I thought that was perhaps going to be another wrinkle, and then it's never even hinted at ever again. Like, did I read too much into that?
no, I was actually sort of saying this is gonna bring up the same thing. I it did seem like a connection is forming. Um, whether it is just familial or like an emotional attachment, like you're implying, I wasn't gonna really try and wager a guess because I didn't want to because I'm not able to because my bigger complaint about the movie is that at a certain point Lola just disappears from the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Like around the 3/4 mark or 2/3 mark of the film, she just stops being a part of the film, like entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Like it goes through all of the setup where Andrew is forming a an attachment with Domino and a separate but equally important attachment with Lola. But then when it comes time to resolve those things, the movie just kind of forgets that Lola is there.
Mm-hmm.
And it focuses entirely on Andrew and Domino. And they talk about Lola, but from a certain point on, she's basically just becomes like you see her a couple times, but she just becomes kind of a prop in a couple of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be a little disappointing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
no, I know what you mean.
and I mean, she's to be fair, she's there. To be fair, she's there at the very last scenes. But again, she's just kind of a prop in that scene, the last scene. Not she doesn't have like a functional
Yeah,
resolution And maybe that's on purpose. Like they do call out that like she would have difficulty resolving. It's so hard to talk about without spoiling it, but um, it's entirely possible that it's purposeful. They do at one point talk about the fact that he might never see her again, and what that would the consequences of that would be for her. But it does bother me that but by that point she's been gone from the movie for a solid 20 minutes, right? Like
Mm,
it's not we had this conversation, then we never saw her again. It's we never saw her again, then later on we talked about it.
mhm.
So it's I feel like I'm giving too much of this away. Um,
No, I see your point. Like she's used as an emotional. Like they say goodbye twice. Like, there's two conversations between Domino and Andrew at the end, uh, and that are very very important. And the
very well acted,
very well acted,
and
and she's not like Lola's not a part of either of those. And they did talk about, I'd like to say, like the emotional connection might be too much for her to deal with, but I would like to see that. You know, I think she, by that point, she had earned a place at the table for this three-person relationship, and he definitely built this fatherly kind of big brotherly fatherly connection with this person who doesn't trust anyone else. Like, and just to kind of only focus on Dakota Johnson's emotions at that point was kind of doing a disservice to all the work that had been done to build a connection with Lola.
yeah, it sort of becomes. This is probably a little more extreme than it actually is, but it kind of becomes a different kind of movie in the third act
Mm-hmm.
because they basically drop Lola from the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did like that the film goes to great pains to establish a very close and loving relationship between Andrew and his little brother, David, played by Evan Asante.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that that continued through the whole movie,
Mm-hmm.
and stayed. You know, it has as stories and movies tend to. It has moments of conflict, but it's resolved, and they remain very close through the whole
Yeah.
story, despite a fairly large age gap.
And
Um,
I loved their relationship, and I loved that I've come from a family of four, and you are from a family of two, and I've got two kids, and I've never seen any brother or sister communicate in that way, like so like open and loving and like communicative, and it was again, it's an idealized version of these people. But it was a very sweet relationship. I didn't believe it was real for a second, but it was a very sweet relationship.
yeah, but it's a movie; it doesn't have to be real.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So what are you going to give this one out of 5? I think for
Like
me it's a pretty solid 3.
it's a solid three for me as well, and I really enjoyed it, but it didn't do more. Like there wasn't more than that for me. I would definitely watch it again. I think it's a very easy watch, in contrast to our last movie. I really recommend watching it. It's got some very sweet moments. The dialogue is really snappy and energetic, and it's just really fun and enjoyable to watch. And like you said earlier, we've all been at the stupid puppy dog love stage. Some of us never escape it,
Hmm.
and it's likely to ring true for many people that the way this is resolved. So yeah, I would recommend it. It's a solid three, absolutely.
And it's readily available because it's out on Apple TV Plus. So
Mm-hmm.
if you've purchased an Apple device in the past 12 months, you're
That's
free
right.
to watch it.
That's
Uh,
right. And you should watch it. It's very good.
yeah, and honestly, it's easy to rag on streaming services, but Apple TV Plus actually has a pretty high hit rate of
Mm-hmm.
good stuff versus bad. So
Mm-hmm.
it's uh, debatably one of the more worthwhile ones if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about having more than just a couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, I think we're going
Hmm.
to wrap it up there. Next
Yes.
week, I think we actually know what we're going to talk about because the final
Yeah.
episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi is
Kenobi.
coming up, and we're going to talk about. We haven't really talked about the show too much. We talked about it a little bit, but we're going to talk about it in a lot more depth after it is over next week,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have another couple things we might be watching, but look for Obi-Wan and something else next week.
Yes.
Something
We're
else TBD.
We're gonna have a lot to say about Obi-Wan. We've kind of stored up all our weekly reactions, and when they are unleashed after episode 6, that I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about. I know I do. Are you going to go to the special screenings of all 6 episodes?
There's a what now? There's a no.
So the Disney showing, they are showing the last episode theatrically, and some theaters are showing all 6 episodes in one go, like some kind of like 4-hour movie of Obi-Wan.
That's gonna be more than 4 hours. That's gonna be like they're all like 60 minutes. Anyway, doesn't matter. No.
Anyway,
I did that once. I've done that before for Lord of the Rings, and I never need to do it again for anything. I even the first year that I went to Vancouver Film Festival, I did a day where I spent all day. I chose a theater that I chose a theater that I knew was playing things that I would want to see, so like in a row, and I watched 4 movies back to back to back.
Wow.
To back. And even that with like 45-minute to 1-hour breaks in between the films. No, I don't need to do that again.
Yeah, it's pretty exhausting. I did 3 once, and that was about as much as I could take.
Yeah. It doesn't help that I don't fit in theaters, very generally speaking, physically, but it was pretty bad. So, well, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. We understand we have a bunch more subscribers now, so if this is your first time, welcome. And if it's not, thank you. And if you like us, please give us a 5-star review. Subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice. Tell 2 friends about this awesome podcast that you have been listening to.
Wow.
Where 2 bearded middle-aged white guys... which is totally abnormal in the landscape of podcasting.
I just
talk about movies.
There's not enough straight white guys talking about movies.
That's
right?
true.
So give us a break. God damn it.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's not like every middle-aged white guy hits a certain point in his life, grows a beard, and starts a podcast. It's not like that's a phenomenon.
Yeah, but ours is good.
Ours is good. Yeah, ours is good. So please subscribe, tell your friends. If you would like to support us more directly, please note in the show notes you'll find a link for a Patreon, which is patreon.com/ I think it's Matthew Simpson, and a Ko-fi, and you can support us more directly with those. We produce this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And one more time, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining us on this awesome Friday.
Thanks, guys. Bye.